Hello and welcome back to the Pinnacle Esports channel. Today we're back with another Pinnacle Stack, joined again by Brandon and Hawker. And we've got a familiar face on the channel, NaToSaphiX, the quiz master, as we've seen from the last EPL and all the content we did there. How you doing, Nato?
Yeah, I'm doing great. It's always fun to be. Just doing podcasts in general, but Pinnacle is definitely the best one. So always nice to be a part of that for sure.
It's nice to get that from you. So I want to start you off because I've been seeing a lot of tweets come out from pro players about CS2 and the tick rate. So you're having a little discussion with Rops. I just want to get your take on the tick rate and what's actually happening there.
Well, I'm seeing conflicting information. It's like there's new information coming out every single day. At the beginning, there was like some video that came out where something, if you're flicking in CS:GO, it waits to stop your flick until the next tick. It rhymes as well. And the problem is, well, it's not a problem, but it's actually better in CS2 that it registers exactly where your crosshair is, and that's when you click, that's where it's gonna shoot. But it seems like there are some inconsistencies with this, and there are also some issues with it where, for example, in CSGO, it's something like if you're holding an angle and you're shooting, when you shoot, the firing animation plays, but in CS2, because of the subtick, the bullet gets fired when you click, but the firing animation waits until the next tick. So you get like an experience of the gun shooting later than what is actually happening, which could mess up your feel for holding the angle, basically. And that's definitely one of the biggest things for me right now, where CSGO just is different. About tick rate, since Rob's also, mentioned he did a whole ass tweet. I'm actually tonight setting up an experiment with the young man, and basically I've allied with another company in Counter Strike who are going to be providing some servers. I'm gonna go to random.org and do a coin flip sequence where 1 is 64 tick and 2 is 128 tick. And Rob said we can even test it 100 times. So maybe we test him 100 times. He doesn't know what tick rate it is in CSGO, and he has to guess just from how the game feels when he aims and moves and stuff. If it's 128 or 64 tick. And we'll see how many he gets right. I'm going to try. Maybe I'll even ask one of the lovely casters here, or maybe I'll hit up a YouTuber. I'll try with him as well. And then maybe I'll even grab my fiance, who also plays the game, she has like 1.5k hours of CSGO, and have like a pro. How many does he get correct? Someone who is like a caster or YouTuber or something like this, and then have an average player to see how big of a difference there is, and if it is mostly placebo or if it is repeatable, I guess.
So from your perspective as a player who's put thousands and thousands of hours into this game, what do you think is the amount of times that someone should be able to, like, what percentage do you think you should be able to notice the difference? How easy is it to notice that difference?
I can only talk from my own perspective, where I would say I would definitely be able to feel the difference. It's not something that like necessarily you can feel it in every duel, but I find it, for example, to be extremely difficult to play weapons that like one shot, like not AWP, but if you want to one tap with a deagle or with an AK, that feels really bad on 64 tick in CSGO, in my opinion. And there are just certain differences where you can just feel this feels somehow off. Um, I would say if we do out of maybe 30, which might be what we're going with tonight, I think I would be able to accurately predict it. I, I want to say 25 times, but let's go a little bit conservative and say 22 times. I think for an average player, we are probably not much more than 50-50. But for someone who has invested almost 20,000 hours in Counter Strike, you will be able to feel the difference, is my opinion.
So do you think this is something that will potentially stop new players from wanting to play the game? Do you think that they'll come in and feel that as well and feel that the servers aren't 100%?
No, I don't think it has big difference for beginners. The problem is that depending on what results I get in my video, if it's only professional players that can notice the difference, it's now a problem that Valve has decided to restrict the game to 64 tick. Because for pro tournaments, we would want a better performance server wise. But if even beginners are able to notice the difference, that's when I feel like we have to, I don't know, like sign a petition that Valve has to get shit done, because then you're not just impacting the highest level, you're impacting every level, and that's going to give a worse playing experience. So I think my prediction is that beginners probably won't be able to tell the difference, or even people who've invested like a couple thousand hours. But if you are a professional, there is a difference. Like I would say, I'm going to be able to predict it quite well with the tick rates. Maybe I'll even test myself as well. And yeah, I think the only kind of answer to the question why would they on purpose do something that is making the game worse is like economical. It has to be because they want to cut costs, and that is just when you're about to make a flagship FPS, the biggest FPS game in the world that people have been waiting for I don't know how many years, and then the first experience people get when they look it up is that there's rampant cheating in Premiere and that they are cutting costs on servers. It's not the best first impression, I have to say.
Yeah, it's also just like weird to me that because we were talking about football just before this, like when you go down and you just play five-a-side or whatever, like I'm not playing on a Premier League pitch. I don't need that when I'm just playing casually. So I get it in the casual level, but to actually limit it seems really weird because obviously at the pro level, like the pro Premier League pitches, they have like undersoil heating and all this stuff to make sure it's all great. So I don't know why you would limit it. That's the weird thing, but I think Valve has this thing where they're like they want the game to be exactly the same for casuals and pro players, and they want like the idea that you can just grind the game and then you yourself could work your way up, which is a cool idea. But I don't know why you'd need to like limit tick rate. It just doesn't seem like something they need to do.
But I think I have kind of the answer to that, but it's again just a stupid ass answer. I get people asking in my chat all the time because I believe Valve at some point came out when they were like hyping up the launch of CS2 and saying that there would no longer be a difference between jump throw
Right.
grenades on 64 tick or 128 tick. And what it turned out to be was that that's actually exactly the case. So when Faceit launched 128 tick servers, if pro players are going to play on these servers, the lineups are not going to be the same, and that's what they want. They want people to be able to watch a smoke live at a major or something like this, and then replicate it in matchmaking right after. But they themselves have messed that up, and yeah, I would say then the obvious answer in my head is that then that's everyone play 128 tick. Um,
Yeah.
but again, to me, the only answer can be that they want to cut costs, and that's just yeah, kind of not good enough in my opinion.
Yeah, I think what you said there about wanting to like replicate smokes and stuff, it's definitely been a thing when, like, say, if you play Face It and you want to play more competitive, if you want it, you're going to need to know the smokes. And then if you want to play a bit more casually and you're a Face It player, you take those smokes into that game, you are completely lost, even though you've got thousands of hours, all this experience playing against some of the best players on the platform. So yeah, it's a very tough thing for Valve to be doing to limit that, and it's also just general experience. It's like using 60 hertz up to 144 hertz or even 120 hertz. It's that feeling that as people us that probably use those high refresh rate monitors, you would notice that immediately going to 60 hertz. So I assume it's going to be a similar thing when you're switching between servers. So yeah, it doesn't make sense to me just from a general use case.
Yeah, I'd also be interested in like what NATO. Do you think there's any like? Do you think Rops just gonna like play like normally, or is he gonna specifically like try and like I don't know because he's a massive movement nerd. So I imagine he could do some movement stuff where he would like be able to tell easily. So have you like thought about what he's gonna do on that?
I mean, it is kind of yeah. I went like the science route in school, so I have a lot of respect for the scientific method,
Hmm.
and I want to make sure that we get the video done in an environment where we can actually use the data that we gain for something. That's the one point. So my first thought was that maybe first I will have him play, and he can do whatever he wants,
Mm,
and then afterwards we could test something like aim, right?
yeah.
Where we play like a one-on-one, for example, just me and him, and then afterwards he has to guess, and then we could do something where we pick like maybe a movement map or something like this, and then he gets to try with movement, and then at the end we pick, just for the sake of the video, utility, where obviously he would see, okay, his jump throw lineups, they don't land the way they should, so like he
Yeah.
will get that 10 out of 10, but just for the sake of the video, right? So we get one that's like the complete package. How likely is he to get it from aim? How likely is he to get it? And from movement, how likely is he? And then utility. So like aim, I mean, it's probably gonna be the hardest to feel, and he might not get that that often. Maybe it's close to 50-50, but some other utility he will get 100% of the time. And maybe, as you mentioned, like movement wise, he might know something is off and will get like 90%. And then you can still make the case that, okay, for a complete package, he's pretty good. For aim, it doesn't make a big difference, but for movement and utility, it's like not the same at all. So yeah.
It's a good point you made, though, Hawker, because it's one of those things where once you start noticing that, you kind of course correct yourself when you've got that many hours, and you kind of know that the feeling's off. Like, so that's also going to be interesting as well to see like what he does after a few attempts to see, is he going to
Yeah.
start making adjustments to the way that he naturally plays the game? So
Yeah,
yeah,
like,
going
I
to be
feel like
very odd
if I
and
did
interesting as
this,
well to see.
I feel like if I did this and you gave me like a smoke grenade, I'll be able to tell like instantly.
Yeah, I also think so. And the messed up part as well is that there are some lineups on 64 tick that, I mean, or well, some lineups, for example, Mirage window smokes from spawn, which is done constantly at the pro level. In 64 tick CSGO, I think because the smoke grenade comes out of your body at not a high enough height, those lineups are impossible, like straight up impossible. And so you get a situation where the difference there makes you not even be able to replicate the pros, even if you find different lineups, because some of them are actually literally impossible.
Yeah,
Dude, I would love it though if Rops just like missed his lineup completely and kept trying the same smoke, and then he was like, it's 64 tick, definitely. Like, imagine.
I know one of the things I noticed when I first picked up CS2 and loaded into Mirage was trying that window smoke, like the from the bin. You hold D and you jump through, and it just doesn't work. And the fact that the one that they showed, the one that I found at least, is like some dodgy YouTube video somewhere, and it's like some guy, it's some 5-second video, massive drum and bass playing, and he's showing me this smoke. I was like, I don't want to have to find my smokes through this. Like, I want to be able to watch a pro game or go to some site like CS Nades and just know the smokes. It's not great for players that have put a lot of time into CSGO, a lot of nades, and they just don't work the same. But we've said a lot of bad things, I guess, about CS2. So what are the things that you've been enjoying about it?
Is this a
Dude,
question
anyone?
directed to me?
Just to everyone.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
sure
Someone
everyone's
please,
played.
now we're
Taking
sitting
up
here
so
like,
much.
please, someone get back to
Everyone's
me.
played a fair bit now.
Anything positive?
We can start with Brandon, because I think he had access as one of the first people that I'm aware of. At least.
It's improved a lot since it first came out, like an awful lot, and I feel like that's fair. I like the fact they're doing daily updates, right? That's really good because it's clear that they are listening to the community and they are going to implement changes. Will they do that with the servers? I hope so. But the fact that they are being very vocal and they are updating on a near daily basis is very good for the scene. I want spray to be fixed. Spray's weird, but the tapping and the satisfaction you get in Go from his AK headshot is actually even better in CS2. And I'm actually a fan now of playing. MR12 is actually really fun. And I like the fact it's a little bit shorter. It just means that I can kind of play more games, or I can kind of fit in a quick one and then just go and do something else. So I was worried about MR12, but I actually don't mind it. I feel like the economy might need a little bit of an overhaul though, especially at pro level, because I feel like once you lose both pistols, you're kind of doomed.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, right now, like, I think you're right. For casual play, it's absolutely fine because you're literally just the amount of times you win 4 spies or just someone does something dumb against you and you're holding with a dig. Like you're gonna win rounds like that. Not as much at the pro level though, so we'll wait and see on that. I would have been interested in seeing like if you just reduce the round time and everything by like 20%, like reduce smokes 20%, reduce the round time to like 1 minute 30. Could you have still made it so that the games were shorter? Like I wouldn't have hated that because I do quite like the variety we have right now in like tactics and strategies, and like the overall pacing you get in a pro game of the half, where sometimes you can see in-game leaders condition their opponents and then later on they do the opposite. Like that's all really fun to me. But it is also kind of interesting if you go down to MR12. I actually think mistakes are going to be punished so much more, and that'll be like really interesting to see pros adapt to that. If that's what ends up happening, if you make like one or two mistakes in key gun rounds, you can actually just lose your team the map. So that could be really actually fun to see. Like I think pros are going to have to really nail down and make sure they don't make mistakes as often, which kind of does feel like Counter-Strike to me. Like Counter-Strike always feels like the hardcore FPS shooter. As you said, as long as we get the economy nailed down, yeah, I actually don't hate it either.
Do you think there's any pro teams that would currently benefit from MR12 and they're just saying playing a bit more disciplined and not making as many mistakes?
Oh, that's tough to know. Dude, imagine VP and MR12. Like, do they just lose the games early instead of taking us to 30 rounds? Like, oh no, it might not work anymore.
How about you, Nato? What's something you've enjoyed from CS2 so far?
Well, I mean, I will start a little
Struggling
bit
to
different
think.
and say no. I mean, there are a bunch of things I enjoy about CS2. In general, I just enjoy it actually, and I've found that I have way more of my friends who now want to play the game. It's as if it's like put new life into the casual community of Counter Strike. I feel like my fiance as well. Like we are playing multiple hours every single day, basically, of Counter Strike, and we haven't touched it in matchmaking for months. Um, the thing for me with CS2 and CSGO right now, where we're like kind of in between both, is that I actually think both games kind of suck. And it kind of is really annoying to me because I'm right now streaming a lot. In CSGO now, I played it earlier and I died 3 times to people standing in a smoke where I literally can't see them. And it's like I know there is the aspect of someone being able to play the one way on the smoke, but it's not always like thrown for that specific purpose and it gets used later or something like that. And it's just you get such a feeling of bullshit happening, bullshit in the air, when you die to that. Or I had it also the other day that a Molotov exploded and I just could not see the guy. And those are just two of the changes that I like the most about CS2. The problem with CS2 is that a lot of the really good players are still playing CSGO because there's still tournaments in that. So for me, CS2 needs some optimization. I feel like I posted a tweet today of a guy whose hips went so far out from underneath his body, it was unreal when he swung and peaked. And that's something that I hate about CS2. What Brandon mentioned as well, the spray felt awful for a while. I feel like it's better now, but still. Um, but what I really love about CS2 is like the new smokes, the new Molotovs. I also quite like MR12. I agree though with the economic aspect, like we need that changed. But yeah, I think CS2 is taking all of the bad parts of CSGO and making them better. Like every complaint I've ever had, basically, I feel has been addressed in CS2, and I'm not at all worried whether or not this is going to be the greatest Counter Strike game of all time, because it will. But right now, in terms of the optimization and netcode and stuff like that, it's just not as good as CSGO. So I prefer playing CSGO right now in terms of, yeah, competing. But if I'm playing with friends, CS2 is way more fun.
I think what Brandon's saying about there being regular updates, I think that's as a result of Source 2 happening. But I think it's good that people are being critical now, and we're still in that beta phase. So if it's in this case where we're still in the beta phase, we want the critics to come now so they can continuously improve it. So definitely think you're right there, Brandon, about it being a good thing that they are updating it so regularly and listening to the community.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just
Yeah.
wanted to kind of touch on NATO's point about the hips swinging out in CS2. I feel like I've been twerked on so many corners, and I'm just dead. Like I don't see the head, I don't see the gun, I just see the bunda, and then I'm dead. Like I don't get it. Like what is happening? Like I don't understand like the optimization and the net graph things. So maybe someone else does in the call. Is that a tick thing, or is that just the new norm? Am I just gonna be dying like that all the time now?
I think it has not much to do with the tick rate. For me, what I think it is, it's like an animation difference. because they've, I guess, rewritten basically all the code in a new engine. But I have to say, I hope it doesn't stay, because I mean, I can't really bring it up now, but if I could show you the picture from my tweet, it literally looks like the guy is doing like a Rainbow Six peak, where you are like leaning around the wall, like. And in CS:GO, people are always so straight, even when they're moving side to side and stuff. The upper body always fits the legs, basically, and I think that's what's throwing people off really bad about CS2. Maybe we get used to it, who knows? But I don't like the change, because in my head, it also just feels unnatural. You're running around with a big ass gun, and then your bunda just fucking flies over, smacks some guy in the face. I don't know. It feels really weird, but yeah, I hope they change it. Honestly,
Maybe
Yeah.
that's why the movement
Yeah, I'm
feels
with you on
slower.
that. I also think, yeah, I also think like that's kind of maybe part of the reason why I think hitting headshots feels way easier. I know there was something with hitboxes, maybe apparently. I'm not an
yeah,
expert on all this, but like it does feel like hitting headshots is easier, and that also might be part of the reason why the spray feels awkward, because the body didn't really used to move like at all. It would literally just rotate on a thing. So
Mm.
yeah, it is a bit weird. I think it could be fine. Maybe they just need to tone it down a bit, because I'm sure that there is. The tough thing is we're so used to CS:GO that as soon as anything changes, we always feel weird about it, and we're always going to feel a bit like, oh, I don't know if I like that. But at least toning it down feels like a somewhat of a middle ground, I guess.
The one change that I'm enjoying the most, because I'm still playing Go for the open season. So every time that I switch between and I go back and play one of those games, and someone on the team will buy something and will be like, "Oh, maybe we should have saved." Just being able to refund the guns and sort your economy out if someone makes a mistake. Oh my god, it's a lifesaver.
yeah, I agree. Always those awkward situations where you're sitting there, like, and you're thinking, like, as soon as the round, like the freeze time starts, you're thinking, okay, we should definitely like half buy now. Then some guy purchases an AK next to you. You're like, bruh. And then in CS2, at least you can ask the guy to like sell it back to the black
Yeah.
market or something. But in CSGO, you're just shit out of luck.
But yeah, I think CS2 we've covered quite a lot of it, and it's nice to see that it's finally being able to be played by a lot of the community. And I guess we're just going to wait and see what the first tournament's going to be, where it gets played by some of the best teams in the world. And speaking of some of the best teams in the world, Pro League is currently happening. So I just want to. We're a few weeks past some of the earlier groups, Group B specifically, where Heroic played and where they fell. And with you here, NATO, and having played with some of these guys, I just want to what is the fix for this team? Because they've just declined and declined, and they had that statement at Gamers 8, I believe it was at Gamers 8, where they said that they were just prepping and playing a bit more loose for some of the teams that are a bit more underdoggy. So yeah, I was just wondering, what's the fix for them? How do they manage to come back from this spot?
I think sometimes as a viewer, and it goes for me as well, especially when it's not Counter-Strike, if I'm watching football or something like that, you can sometimes assume that people who are extremely good at what they do, they are like superhuman. But I think we got to realize also that for these teams, motivation, I think, is running low for CSGO. These guys are all itching to get to practice and play CS2 on a professional level. And I think motivation could be an excuse. I think also just my experience in Counter Strike is that the mental aspect can do a whole lot. And one thing that I feel like Heroic have always done a really good job of doing is having 5 guys who seem like a unit and performing so well that uh, individually, all of them basically, that there has never been cause to kick someone. But now I'm seeing HLTV threads a lot, and also people coming into my Twitch chat and asking like, "Oh, when are Heroic getting rid of Tisses?" And I found myself the other day thinking about like, okay, what changes could Heroic feasibly make if they were to make a change? And it's like Kadian can't go because he's AWP and IGL. Stown is definitely not going because then they are stupid. Shush was like, I think maybe Perfecto got like anchor of the year or whatever from HSV. I think Shush was maybe a solid number 2, but like that guy's really good at what he does. Yabi super young guy and has also definitely stepped up in one of like some of the really big LAN performances, from what I remember. And then you have Tesis, who I think is a really good player, but just seems to, unfortunately, kind of for the first time in his career, be the odd one out. And sometimes those things can just be really hard to get back from in a way. It can change the dynamic of the team. Um, so I think I'm pointing more to factors outside the game more than factors inside the game. I don't think it's that Thesis just forgot how to play, or that Heroic forgot how to, I don't know, play as a team or something like this, you know. I think the reason they are sticking by each other, and I hope that they stay together also for CS2, is that I'm expecting an upswing in performance when the motivation comes back, and uh, yeah, I guess just we kind of get a reset. Um, I think that's what people are waiting for right now. Everyone, even casual players, are a little bit like in between, and it feels kind of weird.
Yeah. I'm kind of with you on that. I think that's kind of a problem that quite a few teams are having. I mean, I know we'll probably we'll touch on FaZe later, but like they look like a team to me that are just like they're just here for now, and they know that like how do you get that excited right now, right? Like it's not even like there are these big events anymore to get excited for, like there was with Cologne at least. What's really coming up? I guess Pro League, is always there, but teams kind of amp up for playoffs, if anything. Like there's no major, they know. Like I can totally understand why a lot of the experienced players wouldn't be as hyped right now. I also think there is the thing with Tesses where like he's entering quite a bit on T side, and sometimes if a team's coordination is just like slightly off, that can be really hard. Like that can actually be really rough. If just like the nade timings are slightly off, you can get really screwed. So I'd have to look into that more, because you're right. Like historically, Tessis has been pretty consistent, really good. We know his spray transfers have been nuts in the past. I remember some of those, man. I always love seeing those. But yeah, I think it's a weird spot for Heroic. I don't really think anyone can come in right now and say, yeah, you've got to like make a move. Like it feels like this weird scenario where you don't really want to make moves right now, because you know that the new game's around the corner, and who knows how that's going to be. So yeah, this weird like limbo, unfortunately, where I kind of don't know how seriously I can take all the results right now, which is a shame.
And what are your takes on Heroic, Brandon?
Um, well, yeah, I kind of just echo the sentiment of these guys. I kind of wanted to pose a question though. Obviously, we've got casters and NATO, who's a professional. Like, if there was a release date for CS2, do you reckon that would actually improve motivation in terms of like, okay, well, we know that's the set date, so we can work on these competitions now, and then we've got time to prep? Or because it's so ambiguous and we really don't know what's going to happen, is that a factor for motivation, or does it just not matter at all?
Well, I guess for me as well, it's just everything is a little bit in between. I actually feel like I would imagine professional practice right now is still professional, but it's hard for me to at high elo get good matches in CS:GO, but it's also hard for me to get good matches in CS2 because the player base is split. I had a CS:GO match the other day where I have 5,000 elo and I played with a level 9. The game before, the other team had a level 2. It was because I was playing against Nauk, and I think he was playing with his girlfriend. But either way, it's just I think it's really difficult right now. And I think, yeah, if there was a release date of the game and like a set date for the first big tournament, people would be able to focus all their attention on one game. Because if you are like a heroic player or something right now, you're probably wondering, like, is it worth it for us to go all in on CS:GO for Pro League and try to win it, or is it worth it for us to get an advantage in CS2 for the coming season? And I think everyone is kind of in between there. I think for the young teams, a lot of them are probably focusing on CS2 to try and make some big impact at the beginning. But yeah, I think it would help motivation if it was a set date. I agree with you. Right now, they've said summer, which should end in 4 days, but I'm not sure I can believe it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting because I commentated like the B stream for Pro League a little bit, right, in Group C, and I talked to Stiko and Vinny, and they both kind of said that they feel like practice right now is teams like playing really quite loose, and players are just doing whatever they kind of feel like they want to, which I can kind of understand because like it's not even always about like you're actively thinking, oh, okay, I'll just take it easy. Maybe it's just sort of in the back of your mind. You're a bit like, oh, well, I mean, CS2's coming. I know that I'm going to have excuses. I also know there aren't that many like big events coming up. We haven't got a major or a Cologne or anything. It's like all these small things that kind of add up. I actually think, if anything, even if there was a proper date announced, I just feel like for a lot of the most experienced players, the calendar right now means I don't know what event you get excited for, really. I mean, Sydney will be cool, but it's not like the same sort of like big event that's like prestigious and is going to really define your career, right? So I think maybe that's the main thing that some of the pro teams are going to be struggling with is yeah, it's just it's also just a scenario where if you're a player, you are low key a bit like, okay, is the org really going to cut me because I'm playing badly in CS:GO just before CS2? I mean, probably not, and maybe it is not a bad idea to have a little bit of downtime and then be able to have like a bit more motivation when you get to CS2. Like I totally get it. It's just a bit unfortunate because I feel like there are a lot of teams that are yeah in that sort of limbo right now.
Do you think it's too risky for an organization to make roster changes before that team gets to play in CS2?
That's I think at this point, yeah, potentially. Like it's I mean, it's also just like I feel like some of the teams, even in the previous roster mania, some of the moves I feel like people made were almost like, okay, let's take some of the up and coming players and let's just assume that they're gonna be the ones that adapt quickest to CS2. Like there's genuinely, I think, some thought process there. Um, so yeah, it's tough to say basically because I think a lot of people are just assuming the newer players will be the most motivated, the most hungry, they'll grind the hardest. But I actually also think right now there could be some truth to. I genuinely think, at least when I'm playing CS2 right now, it's easier to hit headshots. I really feel that. I really feel like it's not as hard to hit shots sometimes. So there's part of me that wonders maybe these like most experienced players who maybe don't have the same like crazy skills maybe they'll actually end up doing like fine in CS2. Like maybe Hooksy and Carrigan won't be as terrible fraggers. I don't know. I don't know if the skill ceiling will be as high. I think it'll be really interesting because right now I feel like the movement isn't quite there, and there's all these small things that have CS:GO have this crazy high skill ceiling. I do kind of wonder, like, it might go the other way. Maybe CS2's skill ceiling isn't quite as high. I don't know. Right now, it's kind of hard to tell. So I think no one really wants to like take risks either way.
I would say I think as well you can look at the skill ceiling in a different light, because what I really like about CS2 is that um, as a competitor, I always want the best player to win. Basically, like the person who deserves to win should win. 10 out of 10, in my opinion. I don't like games or sports where there's like a ton of RNG involved. Obviously, it can be a football match where they get a lucky goal and they win, But I want it to be over time. It needs to be favoring the not necessarily the favorite, but the team that plays the best. And that's something I think they've really nailed with CS2, because the smokes, like the fact we don't have one-way smokes anymore, and you cannot do these like ready things where you fade inside the smokes, which has become a staple in the game because you just have to do that. Now it feels like you can more easily outbrain your opponents. Like it's not about just having a smoke and sitting inside of it. The same with Molotovs. There's less randomness in terms of playing behind a one-way motor and all these things. And I think with what you mentioned as well, headshots are slightly easier. I think also there's an argument to be made that if you have more experience, the chances are you kind of are more creative, I guess. Like I think some team like Heroic, they're not sitting and making new strats for CS:GO right now, because what's the point? But I think if you have an in-game leader like Kerrigan going into CS2, you would be very happy, because I think that guy is gonna figure out some insane shit. Whereas if you take like completely first guy that came to my mind, but if you take like Into the Breach, who has Kickert, for example, he has been like kind of on and off the IGL role, and I would say he's not known to be like specifically creative. I think he's a phenomenal player, but my point is just you have a younger IGL. Um, I'm not sure you'll be able to have as many of those pocket strats where you've come up with something no one's ever seen before. Obviously, people have or teams have a big staff behind them now, but yeah, I think actually experience could play a much bigger role in CS2 than it has done in CS:GO, and I hope that that helps average out some of the the IGOs and the older players who are maybe playing more smart than playing on aim. Let's call it that.
So, if the skill ceiling you're saying is slightly lower for this game, Brandon, how do you think that's going to affect some of the stars? Do you think that's going to kind of average out the scoreboards a bit more? Do you think the stars are going to be as important?
I still think the stars will be important, like of course, because now you're going to have different strategies in CS2 that are going to enable them more. The fact that I feel like you can maybe have set grenade lineups that blow up a smoke at a direct timing to get your star involved and maybe just take a swing on an angle is cool. I feel like Carrigan will implement that. I feel like Snappy from Ents is a really good example of someone that will be really creative because he already knows how to unlock potential in his players. So I feel like stars will actually get better. I just feel like the floor might raise up a little bit more. I kind of want to just flip it the inverse. I think the skill ceiling will still be there. I just think the overall floor for the competition will actually just be higher, and then therefore you've got real like minute little niche details that are going to win and lose a game. The fact that you've got the game time that's now shorter as well means that every decision is so much more impactful. I feel like it's going to be a really interesting environment, especially because we're going to have the first year of people adapting to things. And we've seen how much and how regular I think the CS meta has really changed and evolved over the years that we've had Counter-Strike Global Offensive. In CS2, we're going to go through that period again. And that's going to be, in my opinion, the most interesting viewing experience for CS2 because not only is it going to be new, we're going to have all these brand new tournaments that are probably going to launch up, but also we're going to have people figuring out what works and what doesn't, and it won't all just be off the server in practice. It will be in the server live direct, and I'm just excited. I'm really excited for it. And speaking about it more and hearing from obviously everyone's viewpoints, it just makes me even more excited because it's making me think of things that I haven't even thought of yet.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff. Like you said with the nade stuff, I'm imagining like for example lurk smokes like that. You know, there's the Mirage A ramp lurk smoke you can throw right now, and you can sort of peek around it. Like you're probably not going to be able to one way around those smokes as much, but maybe you have a smoke like that where you get forward a bit and you end up like having a specific nade lineup behind the smoke, and then you blow it up, and then you have quick entry routes. Like I don't know how likely these things are because maybe they are going to be too tricky and intricate, but people will experiment with them for sure, which will be a lot of fun. I also think it's just so the thing is, my gut tells me maybe the skill ceiling and the skill floor will be like slightly more compressed. I don't know that. It's really hard to actually know until we see it at the pro level. But I just get that feeling because of the headshot thing I was talking about, but also the movement in CS:GO does feel more sort of responsive with like little jiggle peaks you can do and little individual outplays. To me, it feels a little more responsive in CS:GO, and CS2 feels just like slightly more sort of floaty, and you can't counter strafe as easily or like do these little jiggle peaks. And I think that's actually a huge part of individual outplays in CS:GO. So I'm interested if like maybe I'm completely wrong, and the pros just figure out different ways to outplay their opponents. That could definitely be the case. But right now, I think I do see, like in a lot of clutch scenarios, just how tight the movement feels in CS:GO. I think is actually what allows a lot of 1v1 outplays that we get in CS right now. And I don't know if I feel that as much in CS2 personally.
Do you feel that the AWP almost becomes a bit more of an investment because of the fewer rounds? You're investing more money into these like earlier rounds, and you possibly have a chance of picking up less throughout an entire half of a game. Do you feel like it becomes more important to have an AWPer that is going to be able to survive and to carry this gun over into following rounds?
Um, I will take it since no one's instantly talking. But yeah, I think yes. That sounds logical to me. I feel like the bigger issue for me with MR12 and the economy right now is that doing a full eco like feels dirty. I hate doing it. If you only have 12 rounds a half, I don't want to have one round where I for sure lose. And that's, I mean, why we need to fix it. I had a crazy thought. I don't actually even know if it makes sense. Wait, if I play a rifle, right, and I kill someone and I take that off, can I sell it back in a freestyle?
I think it's see the thing that
No.
I found with it was that you should
No?
be able to only sell the weapon that you buy, because if you buy a weapon and drop it and then someone gives you that weapon back, you can't sell
Oh,
that
that's
weapon.
true, yeah.
So
That would be like infinite
yeah,
money glitch. You
but
could
I'm,
have a
I'm
team playing 5 rifles, and every time you pick up an op, they just sell it off, and then they have more money.
like my
But yeah,
brain is
okay.
rattling with ideas like MR12s. Like, does it make more sense because you're spending more money over fewer rounds now, or like how exactly does it work? But yeah, what are your thoughts on this, Brownie?
Yeah.
I really don't want that to be a thing. If you can pick up guns and sell them, because that is going to make casting an absolute fucking nightmare. Let me tell you. Like, I'm sorry. Like, it's just we'll then have to keep track of like so many different things. And like, whilst I welcome the challenge, that I feel like that will break my brain in the moment. So I please no, Valve. Um, what were we talking about?
We got sidetracked from EPL back into CS2, so it's good to see that the excitement is there for everyone. And we will try and move back over to EPL a bit now. And I want to talk about Navi. I believe it was your tweet, Walker, that I was seeing about Alexi B. I could be wrong, but if it
Yeah.
was, then maybe just run us through some of the stuff you were saying about Alexi B, because been a lot of criticism ever since he joined Navi, and he's undefeated in Pro League currently.
Yeah, I mean, I know a lot of people are going to say like this group wasn't that hard because they don't think FaZe have been doing that well recently. And to be fair, like a lot of the upset teams in this group maybe weren't that scary. But I just do think that, especially when I'm seeing tweets saying like, oh, well, he's got the best player of all time, and he had Immer who was like incredible at the major. And I'm sitting here like this is not the way I look at how this Navi team was put together at all. Like I think there was so many hard things that Alexi has had to deal with when joining this team. I mean, like you said, community pressure was already there. Then you're having to deal with taking Navi international. That's nuts. They've been the best Eastern European team for so long. That's already like a whole different pressure as well, because you expect Navi to be great, but then you've got Simple and Bit coming in English. I was actually listening to a podcast today where Simple himself, even though his English is pretty good, he's even talked about how crazy hard it is. Then they have no core of the roster to work with, which again is huge just for like getting this team to this level this quickly. I think does deserve a lot of credit, because there are so many small things when you don't have that core roster. It's like communication can be completely wrong. Like everyone might have a different idea of a spot name or a strat name, and all these small things I think have made it really hard actually to get this team up to a good level very quickly. And so considering it's been like under 3 months since this Navi lineup was put together, I think it's actually pretty impressive the position they've got themselves to. I was expecting it to take a little longer before they'd actually be able to like top a Pro League group, for example. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't criticisms of Alexi. We'll see how they do in playoffs, and we'll see how they'll do going forwards. But I just think a lot of people were seeing, oh, well, Alexi's joined Navi, and that they've got a lot of good players, so that will be easy. And it's like, no, man. I think there's so many like different aspects that made this a really hard position for him to be put in. And I'm just really happy that he's doing very well. And I think it made a lot of sense as well to me that Alexi and Blade would work well together, because they both seem like pretty pretty intricate guys with some of the ways they like to think about CS. And yeah, I'm glad they've got to a good level very quickly. I actually think this was a really hard job, and he's doing really well.
I don't want to keep talking about CS2, but at this point kind of needs it. It's like, do you think that because CS2 is coming, and as we're saying, like there's not much point making too many new tactics and this for CS:GO, do you think this is the best time that Navi could have made this decision to have gone international? Because now that they don't have to focus too much on the tactical element of CS:GO, and they can focus more on, I don't know, rapport in the team and other aspects like that.
Yeah, it could be. I think just getting like the base understanding of concepts and like communication down. I mean, I guess this is a pretty good time to do it if you're not actually caring too much about the CS:GO results. And if you can get those fundamentals down already, yeah, that could actually transfer over to CS2 really nicely, because it is just like all those small things, like the fundamentals, the way you're comming, the way you just know how your teammates are going to respond. It's normally so hard to get that all figured out within like 2 months. So yeah, I think it's not a bad time to do it.
See
Yeah,
Brandon typing
no,
away.
yeah, no, I agree, right? I think the interesting thing about this Navi roster and the questions I have for it will be, well, what I'm hoping for is you kind of get this, you gotta get this in football, so I'm gonna draw some parallels. And um the main thing for me is like, it's, I really hope that the organization of Navi has said to the CS:GO team, for CS:GO and the remaining life cycle, we don't care about results. We want you guys to kind of just create this culture, this new dynamic of us shifting into an international era. Work with Blade, work with Simple, work with Bit, because in essence that's kind of like the core, because you've got the coach involved in that as well. How does the communication work? Because for me, I've heard stuff, and I don't know how true it is, but like Navi have got like a really complex like comm system, but it's complex to the point where it's actually really simple to understand what's going on because they give like coordinates to certain points. Are they doing that in English? Is Blade going on each map? He's got his like little compass out, and he's now translating everything into English. Like how? Like I don't know how that works. I don't know what the practice styles is going to be like as well with this team, because obviously you've got so many different ideas that are now flowing in from an otherwise one-dimensional kind of Eastern European organization where it's like we will prac in this way, and now suddenly you've got all of these ideas, and it's like, okay, well, are we going to strictly have it the Alexi B way? Are we going to have it strictly the Blade way? Or are we now going to have this blend? And I guess it's kind of having that feeling process of finding out what style of practice works best, not just for one player, but for all of the players on the server. Because Simple and Bit might be used to this so much, and it'd be like second nature to them. But someone like Immer, coming from Gamer Legion, been grinding out, especially in tier 2, tier 3, and has developed and molded a concept over at Gamer Legion, then swap into maybe like a harsher style of um, practice or a more regimented routine. I'm not sure how it all works, but maybe that's definitely going to play into factors. And then you've also got to try and merge your personalities together as well, because you got some big personalities on that team you need to manage as well, because you've got JL, who is hilarious from the outside looking in. You've got Simple, who is serious but could also be quite funny, but a big personality. You've got Bit, that from the outside looks quite quiet and shy, but who knows? Maybe in a team environment, he could be quite vocal and loud, giving a lot of input. And you've got Emma, who again, quiet from the outside looking in, but it might be different. You've got so many things to manage and expect. And all I hope is that the division of Counter Strike at Na'Vi have just said, we want to give you as much time as you need whilst adjusting to this situation in CS from CS2 to find your identity. Because the minute Na'Vi find their identity, that's when their performance will start to skyrocket.
Yeah, what you're saying about JL there, I think is important as well, because I believe there was an article that I read where Alexi might have came out and just straight up said that the team environment would be dead if it wasn't for him. So he's definitely a big point. I'm just wondering as well if you can elaborate a bit on the Navi style of calling, just for anyone who isn't aware, because from my understanding, it was like almost battleships. They'd label parts of the map, so you'd have like Alexi go to C4 or somewhere like that. So just if you can elaborate that for anyone who isn't too sure.
Yeah, so from my knowledge, and I could be talking nonsense, but this is what I know. And it's basically like, on the minimap on CS, like you press shift when you're dead, you bring it up, it's got little coordinates on it. I feel like Na'Vi have got like set coordinates of like C4. It's like imagine the Na'Vi roster is like like pieces on a chessboard, and the map's a chessboard, and they're moving through, and they're constantly clearing different angles, and they're constantly moving through their setups. So it's like, okay, E1 clear, okay, check, throw a nade on like D4, and we'll rush like C. I don't know, but that's basically the point, right? It's basically that they're all moving together, but everyone knows what the call is because it's always the same, and it's like different parts of the map are like related to different pieces, and then you kind of know where you all are on the same page. You know what hasn't been cleared, and you can kind of chop and change like the map in different segments then, and it's easier to break down and understand.
NATO, as someone who's played in a few teams, like, could you ever imagine playing in that? And has there been a system that's been as complex as something like that?
I bet there's definitely been a system that's been as complex as that. But I mean, uh, thinking about it, it both makes sense and doesn't make sense in my head. Because I would say if I'm going up banana on Inferno, for example, I would much rather hear sandbags, let's say, as a T attacking that area, instead of hearing like he could be, I don't know, like just in this area somewhere. Um, I guess you need a lot of numbers for it to make sense, but I guess where it does kind of make sense is that anytime you lose a duel in Counter Strike, there are chances for the other guy to move, funnily enough. And so by instead giving like an area of where it roughly is, you're maybe less likely to be caught off guard because you gotta just be ready for that kind of area. That's the only thing that kind of can make sense. Um, I don't know. I've heard about crazy things as well. I at least the first thing that comes to mind was I once had an IGL where on one map, for example, it was like a Danish caller. His name was Neon, and yeah, on one map, all the smokes would be like all the tactics would be called like a fruit. So it would be like, oh, let's do apple now. Ah, let's do banana, and then it would be like, what is banana again? Ah, that's apple without smokes, or something like this. I played with him for a while, and then it would be like another map. Then it would be men's perfume. It would be like, let's do Armani now, or something like this. Like, I don't know why he did this actually, but he did. So each map had its own theme, and then you only had to remember like it's actually kind of cool. But either way, I'm sure people have come up with crazier things. Like this one was a throwback to like 2014 or something, back when this guy was. But
Sounds like he was looking for a sponsorship deal.
yeah, maybe. But, yeah, it was like actually kind of cool, and maybe I should bring it back.
That's the
But either
stream.
way, yeah, maybe. But I like people come up with crazy things. I think with this Navi, from what kind of I would say I know is that that I thought it was more like I think they were doing when Zeus was still there. It's possible it still has somehow survived, but to me it seems more confusing than good. Obviously, Navi have been extremely good as well. So probably it is working, but yeah, I don't know. I don't think I would take this over the system you have basically in any other team. Um, yeah, that's kind of how I view it.
You'd imagine it'd be quite confusing as well, becoming an international team, so you're already learning to speak English for most of them, um, and then also having to learn a system where the map callouts are no longer the norm. So
Yeah.
it's got to be even harder, right?
I would have to assume they've gone back to like just kind of normal comms because at least they've played like like they would have played FPL and had rough calls and even like I mean a lot of teams will have like for example they'll say renegades when it's a certain set of smokes that are going down like it's just stuff like that that can sometimes be a bit different. I will say this is a good example of the culture can be very different between Eastern Europe. I think I heard before that in Eastern Europe if you smile at a stranger in the street they'll think you're an idiot because they'll be like, "Why are you smiling? What is there to be happy about?" Like their culture is incredibly like blunt in a weird way, and I think that's something that actually is going to be hard for some of the players. And I think it's going to have to be a blending of both sides because I know that someone like Simple, he would have just been literally saying, I'm pretty sure he would have just been saying to his teammates, like, this is not good enough. You need to do that better. That was shit. He would have just said that. And he just genuinely means it because he thinks that the person needs to hear that. But I think for someone like Imma, especially, I feel like he's still very uncomfortable with that. I don't feel like he's the kind of guy that is going to get used to that. And I think when I was listening to that podcast that Simple did, I think he's aware of it as well, actually. And he's even said he's kind of like testing sometimes, and he'll go a bit hard on a player just to see what reaction he gets, so he can kind of figure out if the player like takes that sort of stuff well, or if he needs to be a bit more relaxed. So I think they're aware that the culture is going to be a problem, and hopefully they can solve that because I think Imma's the one player that is probably underperforming right now. And the other thing I will follow up and say quickly is also, I was looking at the stats for this group, and Navi won 48% of their 4v5s, which is just never going to happen again. That's fucking wild. So that's not going to continue. So maybe a bit of an overperformance there, but other than that, I'm happy with Na'Vi.
Yeah, I think Ema has been one of the players that's definitely been a standout. I keep putting him in my fantasy teams. I did it again. That's 3 times now, and yeah, it's low scorer, so not too pleased with that. But Brandon put in say he has as well. But what you're saying there about him like coming into a team with someone like Simple who is quite blunt. The team he was on before Gamer Legion, I mean, the most experienced player on that lineup when he was there, probably Acor.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think about who's in the lineup, but so that's got to be a massive change for him, and I should say some explanation as to why he's
Yeah.
not performing to that major MVP level performance that we saw of him in Paris.
I think Simple also alluded to that in the podcast I listened to earlier today, because he kind of basically implied that he thinks that a lot of the sort of like tier 2 teams just don't do this at all. Like they don't tell a player when he's doing something badly. So I think he's trying to say like, okay, we need to do this a little bit, but maybe not be quite so harsh with it, because I think like the old lineup, I think they were used to that culture. I don't think these new guys will be. I think maybe Alexi actually would be, because Finns are just wild and they just don't seem to care about anything. They're ice cold. But yeah, I think they're both aware. Like I'm hoping that they can figure out that culture. Although that's the one thing I will say. The only aspect where I'm curious about Blade as a coach is a lot of coaches in sports and in football. It is about getting that team culture nailed down. I don't know if Blade strikes me as the kind of guy that does that. He strikes me as fully like a tactician, and it's him leading, but I don't see him maybe being as good there. So maybe that's something the players themselves will have to figure out. But Simple seemed pretty reflective, and he seemed aware of the problems there. So that's a good sign at least.
Maybe Blade needs to watch the Arsenal All or Nothing and get some of those
Yeah.
in between map talks going.
But like, why is it also, and I'm falling into this trap myself, and I feel like we now here as a group are falling into the trap as well. Why is it that anyone is expecting Emma to be like prime Nico?
Yeah.
Because honestly, the guy was never bad, but he was a pretty average professional player for a long time. Like, he was very good on Nexus, for example,
Yeah.
but you don't see Nexus playing the major, for example. And what he delivered at the Paris major was, I would say, arguably the biggest overperformance we've ever seen at a major. And I don't hate the guy. Obviously, I think he's actually really good. And watching him at Paris was extraordinary. Like, legit, he was, and you were expecting it as well after some games. Like, even going into the semifinal, you're like, oh man, this guy is gonna smash everything now. And he did. But I don't think if he would have stayed in that Gamer Legion lineup, he would maybe ever be able to replicate the form he had at that tournament. Like, just that was potentially a once in a lifetime. I actually want to say almost definitely a once in a lifetime, unless Immer goes on to become an all-time great in CS, which I don't think he will. Again, no offense, but just with how his career has progressed so far, typically like the Simples and Cybus that get spotted very, very early. And even when Navi picked him up, I had the expectation that this guy was not going to live up to anywhere near the performance he had at that major. And he got signed because of that major, I think. There's no way Navi had him in their sights before that major. So I just think it's kind of unreasonable of anyone to expect it. And I also feel like it's weird in a way that they now go out and like he kind of has to go out and defend himself. Yeah, I'm not playing so good because I'm not the guy who's, and the other guys, they're like, yeah, but we got to get our star player to play. And it's like, bruh, this guy is a good player, but he is not the guy you're looking for. He is not your, I don't know, Electronic or Perfecto comes in as some kind of like, I don't know, all-time great in their role kind of thing. I just don't see it. And I honestly also think at some point, if they don't make it work, he will be one of the first to go. If he doesn't pick up his performance, which I actually don't think he will, because again, I agree with you as well, Hawker. Culture-wise, I just don't think he's a good fit. Not that he is like gonna be talking shit about people or something like that, but I also get the impression he's maybe a bit too soft in terms of his personality. And yeah, I think I don't know. We need to lower our expectations. Stop
Yeah.
picking him in your fantasy teams, RG.
Yeah,
It's not
guys.
good for you.
It was
Part
the
of the
last
problem.
time. It was the last time.
Yeah.
It's all right because
It's
I
good.
was still picking NIP players for the last year. So
Oh
like,
no.
yeah,
Oh.
don't
No, yeah,
follow my fancy advice.
yeah. No, I'm especially with NATO because I looked it up again. Because I was like, okay, did Imma and JL play any like big tournaments before this team? I looked it up. No, the Blast Major was Imma and JL's first big events on HLTV ever. Like that shit's wild, man. Like they got picked up off that straight away. Like yeah,
Yeah.
we can't expect them to come in and be incredible straight away. And also, I think the other obvious thing is that Imma has probably been the best player on like all his teams he's ever played on. Like he was playing in the Romanian scene. He was the best player there for a long time. He was the best player on Gamer Legion. It is going to be very different not being like the big dog anymore. Now you got Simple on your shoulder, and Simple's a pretty big dog, let me tell you. He barks loud.
And let's pass this question to another big dog. Do you,
Ooh.
Brandon, do you think it's almost like a storyline thing that is the reason that we've set his expectations so high? You know, you perform that well on the biggest stage, and everyone's saying he's competing with Zai Wu for the top for the MVP of this major. Do you think that's the reason why we've set our expectations so high for him?
I think in general the Counter-Strike community has some issues when it comes to firstly overhyping players and managing expectations. So I think I can address this in two parts, but basically I think yeah the storyline of Gamer Legion at the major was beautiful because also what you got to consider is they weren't announced as their team when they actually played the open qualifiers. So they played through the open qualifiers, they made it through to the RMR, then they got announced as Gamer Legion. The whole origin story of Gamer Legion as well, the fact that Shui and Ash put that team together, they handpicked players that they wanted. The fact that Imma was staying on that lineup as well speaks volumes. Then obviously they perform well at the RMR. They perform really well at the major. Everyone seems to be popping off, but Imma in particular is a standout. He's an unknown quantity if you don't watch like tier 2, tier 3 CS. People will know of him, but won't know the value he brings. So ultimately, you see this guy owning tier 1 players in the biggest event of we're going to have in the calendar year because there's only one Counter-Strike Global Offensive major, and people are going to think, oh my god, like we need him instantly. And so as a result, teams will sign him. And I think it's fantastic that he has been picked up because he deserves an opportunity at tier 1 because he performed really well and he's been grinded in tier 2, tier 3. He deserves that step up. So more power to him for getting that move. But what I will say is that people will put unnecessary expectations, not just in Counter-Strike, not just in any sport, but just in life. There's unnecessary expectations when it comes to different things. And also, the thing that annoys me the most about Counter-Strike community and transfers is if it doesn't work out after like a month and a half, people will be like, oh my God, they need to go. They need to make roster changes. Man, shut up. Like, it's so annoying. Like, can you just give teams a chance? Can you just make them just have a little bit of settling in period? It does my head in, guys. Like, it really grinds my gears. Like, I just can't. Like, just let these teams have the opportunity to build and have a structure. Let them have a few tournaments where they can figure things out and they can play at the highest level. It takes time. These guys aren't robots; they are human beings.
Bloody hell. Tell us how you really feel, bro.
Damn,
Oh,
Brandon going in.
How long has that rant been saved up? It's been
oh,
building for years.
I want to slightly move away from Navi now and move to the group that's starting tomorrow. So Liquid is the main talking point. You've got the new additions, Patsy and Rainmaker. Brandon, they've not been there that long, so do you reckon it's their time? Their time's up already?
what? But I mean, Patsy's not here for like the first 2 games, so I
Do you
mean
think roster
that's
changes
playing.
are already needed after the month that they've been there?
No,
You're gonna get him on the rant again.
Yeah, I'm just I'm just
no,
trying to
no,
take him
no.
up at this point. What I do want to ask about it, obviously it's a downgrade going from Patsy to Dabs. It has been rumors that this should be only for a few of the games, but The one question that I keep seeing get asked, and I know we've discussed this about other teams when they've had stand-ins with their coaches coming in, but I keep seeing this question get asked by people across Twitter or X. Stupid change, but yeah. People have been asking, is Daps going to call now, and should Yakinda get let off the leash? And it doesn't make sense. I know we've discussed this, and I imagine that's what your answers are going to be. But I just want to get your takes on why this is so that we can address it, because I have seen a lot of people asking the question, like, should Daps IGL at this event? So yeah, basically, I just want to get your guys' takes on that. But I assume I'm going to know the answer, but just to address it.
Brandon looks very sad, so I want him to go first.
Okay, no, it's fine. I just basically for context of the podcast people, I'm lagging a little bit, so I don't want to talk over people, and then we get this awkward like silence. But I can go first. Yeah, I think the fundamental thing is, why would you? It's for one event. We're approaching the end of Go into CS2. We said this a lot, right? Why for one event? If your coach has to play a couple of games, why would you change the entire structure of the team rather than giving your Kinder more experience, calling in this team and being the IGL? I think it makes more sense for him to get as many reps as possible. You can let him off the leash if you want, and he can go crazy and he can frag out, but it might achieve something in the short term, but I think for the longevity of the roster, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, definitely. In terms of getting more practice with someone who is still learning the role as well, doesn't make sense. The only caveat, I guess, is that I feel like he could fit into the roles that Patsy's playing quite well, and that would be the only reason. But yeah, it doesn't make sense for them to do that if he's still learning the role, and I think that's what has happened a lot in the past with a lot of these stand-in opportunities. So I want to ask towards you, Hawker. Do you think that VP's expectations are slightly heightened now that they have are playing against a Liquid in the first round that are weaker?
I mean, you know what's higher my expectations is Norbert coming out and saying they've done maybe 140 hours in the last 2 weeks. Holy shit, man. They're grinding hard, and I don't think anyone else is grinding hard. So, yeah, I mean, VP are always just in this weird spot where they seem to just play so few events where we kind of don't know what to expect and we see them so little. I could see them doing well here, though, for sure. I think they should be making it through the group. I will say on the Liquid thing, though, dude, I'm just imagining if I was Daps, dude, I'd be so tempted to come back in and just call a couple of games. I know this is why I can't be a coach, because it's not a good idea, but I'd be so tempted to be like, all right, one more time. Let's run it back. I'm going to call some games, and then if we keep winning, I'm not subbing myself out. I'm still going. We're going to go all the way, baby. Come on, you wouldn't be tempted?
Maybe a little. So we need you there to convince them to do it, Orca. Need you there as a GM, I think.
Can we talk Daps into it? How can we do it? We need to sweet talk him.
Yeah, but
The thing
then at
is,
the next event,
he had to keep coming
Stanislaw would
back in now.
replace him, right?
Exactly. Yeah. He's used to it.
I want to go on my own little rant here, if it's okay with you guys.
Go for
and
it.
I want your thoughts on it as well,
Yes.
because actually this just popped up in my head, and I didn't realize it was an issue I had. What is it with organization? Like, is it because of CS2 or what, that like most of the top teams, they have just decided, let us just take some like random mishmash of 3 players and put them in my team? Like, I would say if anyone would have said before the Paris major, like, yeah, JL and IM are on Navi, I would be like, what? And the same with like, yeah, Rainwaker and Petsy are on Liquid now and stuff like this. It's just weird. And I guess my question in a way is, do you think that we have come to a point where the like Academy League was so successful that everyone and their mom needed an Academy player, and now that every team has a core of Academy players, now it's like, wait, but we don't even know how to play anymore. Now we need some older guys coming back or something. I don't know, because it feels like Navi, I mean, you don't have a core anymore, so you just take like 3 new guys, and then like Liquid as well. It's like they also changed 3, right? Like it's Patsy, Rainwick, and isn't there one more? Or am I
They
making things up now?
Well,
So it's no,
Yekindar
it's NAF,
technically.
Kinder, and OC.
Yeah, okay, but then Likinda, you change
Yeah.
him to IGL all of a sudden, right? I mean, it's kind of the same. It's just like I've always been a big fan, and I would also say we've seen it time and time again. Like Virtus Pro, since we brought them up, they brought in Chiron. He played really good, and then for some reason they kicked him. I don't know what happened there, but there's so many times that a team has brought in a guy where you're thinking, this guy maybe is not good enough yet, and then they bring him in, and that one guy, like they teach him how to adapt to the system and how to play against tier one, and bang, you have a top level player. It doesn't seem to work that well if you change three players at once, and all of them have to, like, I don't know, adapt to a new environment and a new. I mean, I know Patsy, for example, he was a pretty solid player. Even I would not call him a tier one player, but Spirit has had some deep runs in a major and stuff like this. But someone like Rainwaker, for example, or Yekindar as IGL, I'm pretty sure the guy's never been an IGL ever before in his career. What is this perversion with wanting people who have not, I don't know, like changing more than half of the team just seems crazy. And it seems like it's not paying off for anyone, at least in my opinion. So I wonder, do you guys think that some of these teams are going to be like, okay, this was not working, so now we got to replace some of the younger guys with some people who have some more experience, and it becomes like a little bit more normal again?
I think something that'd be quite interesting to look at is like how many of these academy players have joined a team, and then how have they performed as a result of that. Like, how many academy players do you need to be the most successful team? Because if you look at like G2, they've added one, and
Mm.
IP added one, but they've had such different levels of success, and that's probably due to the core of uh, G2 being a lot better than NIP, as it pains me to say, but it's the truth of it. But yeah, like other teams, how many academy players do you really need, and when is it too many? I think it's a very good point.
What's great is that Mouse have got to the point where they're cycling out academy players for new academy players. They got Yimpat in now instead of JDC, and I don't even know if I like that move. I don't think Yimpat's looked that good so far. Yeah,
No, is that working for them? Because
no,
they just went out of this Pillar Yacht Nordic Masters where they got like third in the group, and the people they lost to was Victory Zigzag and 416 Olsk.
big teams.
I
Awesome.
saw
We all
some
know and love
things
them.
about Victory Zigzag that probably shouldn't comment on the podcast, but
Oh.
yeah, I think NATO knows what I'm talking about, maybe Brandon, but yeah, Mouse seem to be losing in a lot of these events that don't get too much attention. So I think it's okay for them. And you'll see one guy share their loss on Twitter and you'll be like, oh my God, they lost to them. But it never gets brought up. Like it's going to get swept under the rug and they continue chugging and they get to a tier one event and then they do okay. And you're like, okay, what's going on with you guys then? I just, yeah, don't know where to place
Yeah, yeah.
Mouse, but yeah.
No, I'm with NATO on like. I mean, especially I'm not gonna lie. I actually looked at a few Rainwaker demos when he got picked up, and even when I was watching them, I was like, I just didn't think like raw skill wise he was like that good. Like I know he was a pretty smart player from what I saw, but I was just a bit confused. I was a bit like, yeah, I don't know, and especially because the other thing is like when you let Elige go. I know Elige hasn't been great on complexity, but when you let him go, he was your franchise player for a long time. Complexity aren't just going to give you a liege back. Like, that's not going to happen. You'd have to pay a shit ton to get a liege back at this point. Now, I don't know if a liege will like get back to that crazy level again, but like we knew what he did in the past, so it does feel wild to just kind of so many teams just seem to be letting these players go. Brandon's got his hand raised, so I'm gonna I'm gonna let him take
He's such
over.
a polite young man, isn't
I don't want to interrupt the flow. I think to add on to the point, maybe something I just thought of was potentially. I don't know how it worked with Team Liquid in the past when they were NA, but I know that they're actually a European organization. So maybe they wanted to come back to have EU players, and they're okay taking NAF, they're okay taking OC because they knew that they'd be happy just out like moving their entire life to Europe and just boot camping in Europe for better practice. So maybe it's something to do with that. In terms of the Rainwaker point, from whenever I watched Rainwaker in tier 2, obviously he doesn't have the experience in tier 1, and they did take a chance on him. But whenever I watched him in tier 2, what I will say is he is very consistent. Like I feel like Liquid, when they're making this transition again, similar to Navi, they were just looking for a player potentially that they could rely on and could be fairly consistent. Has Rainmaker been that player in tier one? No, obviously, because it's a difference between tier one and tier two. But I'm just trying to offer some maybe thoughts as to why they thought, okay, well, this guy seems pretty consistent in tier two. 500 slash Skade at one point, just during the pandemic, were regarded as like the gatekeepers to tier one. So if this guy's the gatekeeper and he's been on that team, then potentially he could maybe make the step up. It is maybe some of the thought process. Maybe got some insight from Yakinda. Maybe they played together. I don't know, but that could be another thing.
Do you think it's a bit odd that sorry, no, we'll go. I'll ask
No,
this
no, you
question
can go
and
first.
then
It's
we'll,
fine.
I'll
No, it's
ask this
fine.
question to you, and then you can continue what you were going to say. Do you think it's a bit odd that if they were going international anyway, that they kept OC and they didn't pick up someone like Dexter who's lurking about?
I don't know. Do you want to answer that, Brennan?
Not really. I don't know.
Yeah, I can. I mean, I think it kind of makes sense. Like, I think OC is pretty solid, and I think someone like Dexter, I think as an org, but also as a player, is always a little bit risky picking up a player who is from the outside playing super well, but it seems like people are not interested in having in the team. It's always like you feel there must be something that you cannot see from the outside, and I always thought that Dexter seemed like the most likable guy when you see him on streams and stuff like this, but I don't know. I guess people are not standing in line to pick him up, and I seriously have no idea why. But yeah, that's kind of what I'm thinking. Uh, I just wanted to kind of clear up what I said, that it's not specifically about Rainwaker, and I think also the Rainwaker pickup. I think it makes a lot of sense. It's more the fact that teams are now doing it with multiple sort of talents at the same time, and that's where there's not as much experience to feed off of, basically. I heard someone say recently that experience is one of the most underrated things in Counter Strike, and I would actually kind of agree with that, because you always talk about young talents, but you rarely talk about like picking up a very experienced guy. Whereas in any other type of work, you typically rely on experience. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. Dude, I mean, even like, I'm thinking about it now. We haven't even touched on Vitality, who everyone would say are the best team right now. And like, sure, like Spinks and Flames aren't crazy experience, but like, they at least, I feel like, proved themselves at a way higher level than a lot of the pickups now. Like, they were at least playing at lands, and you saw what they were capable of. Whereas, yeah, some of these pickups now, it's like you said, it's either that they're making too many changes at once, whereas like Vitality have been pretty solid throughout. They just seem to make like one roster move. They've slowly transitioned towards this current roster, or it is sometimes, in my opinion, players that have just not had that, like, at least 6 months or a year of lands on like maybe an OG or a team like that. Yeah, I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Maybe it's people like Mouse and Monacy that have ruined it for everyone, because everyone looks at them and they're like, oh wow, everyone's everyone can just do a Monacy, right? Turns out it's not so easy.
Do you think the way that Vitality integrated the Spinks and then also Flames is kind of the ideal way to do it? Because you brought Spinks into a team with major winners and the best player of the year, and then well, Apex is also a major winner, but and then once you've got a major with Spinks, it's almost like the student becomes a teacher, and you can bring in another. I mean, if you want to call it an upgrade, I know there was still a lot of conversation pieces about Dupree, but you bring in Flames and then you kind of repeat the cycle. So I think that's the ideal way to be doing it, rather than what we're saying about Liquid.
I think so, at least. Like, also, I think before the Paris major, I'm not 100% sure, but I feel like there was some kind of interview where Spinks came out and said something like, Vitality have made it clear that they need to rely more on like my firepower. Like, I need to be the second star, and that clearly worked, because he was, I think, yeah, the third highest rated player at the event or something like that. I completely agree with this. Like, the student has become the master in a sense, and that's why it works typically really well when you have four people who can then, I mean, from what I see, if you have a guy who is in tier 2 or tier 3 who's like really having insane stats, typically that can really well, like they can translate really well to tier 1 as long as the people around him are teaching him things, right? But you get to a certain point, like Spinks, for example, where now he has become just a tier 1 player. Like his decision making has been refined to the point that he can hold his own, and he would even be able to give off some of that experience to a new guy, and that's why they make the change to Flames. um, I think that is the right way, and also in a more traditional way to go about it in Counter Strike. It seems like just in the last 6 months or something, people are just so into just picking up as many young talents as you can, because it feels like they always flip a profit, you know. But I think what they fail to realize is that the ones that have flipped a massive profit, like Monacy and such, these are the guys who actually came into an established 4-man core, or like at least of people with a lot of experience, and then you know, they were molded into this player, flipped a profit, but not because, I mean, they were playing with two other people who were also like 17 alongside them, you know. uh, yeah, that's my take on it anyway.
Yeah, dude, it's also actually going to be interesting because now, like previously, a team like Ents were literally almost, I don't want to say a farm team, but like people would look at Ents and be like, oh, who can we take next? Who's proving themselves? Ents are now like on HLTV, the second best team in the world. So, like, if you're an Ents player, maybe you have a bit more incentive to stick around rather than, going to a Liquid in the future. Who knows? Like, it's actually going to be interesting because I think these orgs in our heads, we obviously think of them as, oh, well, Liquid, we think of the era they had and all they've done in the past. But at some point, unless you continue to stay up there in like a top 5, top 10 team in the world, at some point, some players are just going to kind of, slowly stop thinking about you that way. And I mean, look at EG. Like no one wants to go to EG anymore. They were a top 5 team not that long ago. Like, and it's crazy how you can't really imagine a top player going to EG right now. You just can't imagine it. So yeah, these orgs, like, got to make sure you don't slip too far because the players are kind of oftentimes the big draws on a lot of teams, and yeah, gotta be careful. You don't want to become EG.
It's crazy as well because like they are huge orgs, not only in Counter Strike but across every other esport.
Yeah,
So you think that the main incentive to move from an ENTS to, Lord behold, we say an EG, is because they have, reputation on a much higher space, like on a global space across other titles. So yeah, you'd think that someone who plays for ENTS might look for a Liquid because of the reputation that org has, but you're definitely right. Maybe they should just stick it out and go for it. But um, I'd like to get your takes on what we've been discussing, Brandon.
I think honestly it just comes full circle to the original conversation we were having about Navi. And it's the fact that if you change too much, you lose the identity of the organization, you lose the identity of the entire team. And that's why replacing one guy is way easier than replacing three guys, because you're not building from the ground up. As NATO said, you've got a framework. The reason why no one wants to join EG is because they've lost their way. There's no identity. They tried to import EU players after releasing the blueprint. They now have gone back to the blueprint. Fantastic. Will they stick to it? That's now the next question, because you've lost belief in what they believe in themselves because they keep telling us conflicting opinions. The moment
damn,
you lose your identity as a
that's
team,
deep.
it's true though, but because the moment you lose the
Yeah,
identity, the
I
moment
agree.
you lose the culture, and you don't, and even the organization doesn't really believe in the principles that they've set out, why would you invest in it? As a player, as the time. Whereas you look at Ents, and a team like Ents, where they've taken players in, they've built them up, and sure, they've moved them on, but you know that ultimately that they want to play the same style of Counter Strike, and that's kind of the transfer policy they're always going to implement. It's kind of like in the Premier League, if people watch football, it's like Southampton when they were in the Prem, taking the academy guys and then building them up, and then suddenly they go to Liverpool, they go to City. Like it's very similar to that, but that's always going to be the career path for a lot of those players, and they knew what they were getting into when they joined that team.
It's probably a good thing with ENTS as well because these other orgs are probably so much more corporate and on such a large scale that going to somewhere like ENTS probably has a bit more of a personal touch to it. Like these players probably feel like they belong to as you say, the identity into the brand a bit more than they would somewhere that's just humongous.
Yeah, 100%. I think I'm really happy for Ents. I feel like for the longest time they've been like one of the orgs that seem like they're doing things right, and they actually sort of seem like they're trying to make money while doing esports, which most teams kind of aren't right now. So yeah, very happy with where Ents are right now.
There's one more question I want to ask about this group. And because NA has had, to no surprise, not a lot of success across Pro League so far. You had EG, M80, I think 9Z qualified, but they're South America. So at least they got something for the Americas. But now you've got Complexity and Liquid. So I just want to ask, who has the better chance of making playoffs?
It's a fun question.
People trying to
I'm
remember
giving myself
if
a
Complexity have been doing
Yeah,
any good
I'm
recently.
checking.
No, that's the thing. That is the thing. It should
I
still
think
be. I mean, Liquid should still have the better chance, right? Like, Complexity just have not been that good, unfortunately. I don't really know why. I thought they'd actually be pretty decent, but for whatever
there's
reason, it kind of hasn't worked.
there's a loophole to this question because Complexity is full American and the core of Liquid is now European. So you said which American team is going to do the best? It's Complexity.
Well, it's becomes NA when Daps is playing.
Ooh,
Oh shit, he got you.
bro,
Yeah,
you
The-
great.
can't bullshit a bullshitter. Okay, that's actually.
Okay,
So,
So we're
well,
only
that's fine.
judging the first two games. then.
yeah, just for the first few games.
I could just throw that question back on you. Do you think Daps is going to do well when he hasn't played over Patsy,
know what?
who's one of their better riflers? No.
I'll put him on the
So,
fantasy
like,
team.
Complexity's got a better chance.
Daps will outfrag JT. You heard it here first.
Ooh.
Ooh.
I don't know if I actually believe that. But I thought it'd be fun to see.
but you heard it here first.
How much do you think Daps is going to come in fantasy? I assume they're going to change him instead of Patsy. It's got to be quite far down the list, right? Maybe a 150. Maybe he's the loophole to building your dream team.
I don't know if they change it actually. I think once they release it, I feel like sometimes they just keep it, especially because Patsy might come back.
And anyone
So
who put
that'll
Patsy
be a
in and
shame.
then like maybe had to go on holiday or something and doesn't have time to change it. Poor guys.
Did you guys check HLTV, by the way? Like, OG is playing right now,
the
and they
OG
lost
game, yeah.
first map against fake Natty from Brazil.
This OG?
16-5. Yep. 16-5.
That's the old
that the
Cold
Zero
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 lineup?
Nation team, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. But still, it's not a good look. Like 16-5. Yeah.
OG, another team that I just don't have a lot of desire to take interest in anymore since they announced that roster. It's just such a waste, in my opinion.
Yeah, it's a shame.
So the last thing I want to do is just get your guys' takes on who you think is going to win Group D in a Pro League. So we've got Cloud9, Eternal Fire, Complexity 9, Liquid VP, and G2 Lin Vision. So we'll start with you, Hawker, and we'll go around.
I mean, does it logically make sense that Cloud9 would win this group? Maybe not. But did I pick them to like win Cologne? I think I did. So I think at this point I'm kind of committed. I think Cloud9 will actually be good, and I kind of do sometimes feel like G2 might not be 100% like motivated for this. See, NaTo just doesn't believe me so much. He's had unbelievable.
My dog keeps smacking on the wind.
But yeah, I actually do like. I'm still baited by Cloud9's lineup, man. It just looks so good. Like, look at it, guys. It looks too good. I'm gonna say Cloud9 win the group. Screw it. Why not?
They definitely seem to have the easiest side of the bracket.
That's true.
So I think definitely.
Dude, VP upset G2. Oh, I could see that.
And you're gonna back them again after Gamers 8.
Now the real question is, do you back VP to win the whole group? Norbert's got
Ooh.
140 hours, boys. He's gonna pop heads. I
I
can feel
see.
it.
I see Brandon nodding. Brandon, who's your team to win this group?
I don't know. Like I kind of want to say VP because like it's kind of a meme on the podcast, especially after Hawker said that they'd upset FaZe at Gamers 8 and they did. Like
That was
I
the
kind of want to start
easiest upset
believing in
pick
them.
ever. You guys should have listened.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I kind of want to say VP, but like I won't. I don't know. I mean, I want to say my logic tells me G2 are going to win the group, but do they get upset by VP? Maybe. Do they lose to Cloud9? Potentially. But I mean, who knows anymore in Counter Strike? Anything can happen. That's why we love it. I'll say G2. Why not? Let's have a different answer.
Okay, NaTo, how about you?
I mean, my logic also tells me G2, but in predictions, it's not really that fun to be logical. So I am going to say, nah, I'm going G2. I looked at the teams. I was like, Cloud9, nah, not feeling them. Nah, not feeling anyone. I'm gonna call it to do some kind of. I'm gonna say Eternal Fire win the opening match against Cloud9.
Ooh.
That's
Yeah.
my
Oh
that's
God.
my going out on a limb, and then I'm taking G2 to win the group.
For any reason that they win the opening match, or gut feeling?
Gut feeling,
Okay.
baby.
Brandon seems to hate that choice.
No, he's doing it for the hot take for the podcast, so he can tweet it when it's right. I respect it. I rate the hustle. There's no way Eternal Fire win that best of 3. There's no shot.
Do you think that they make it through though?
Oh, they could do.
Ooh.
I really. The thing is, I really
Yeah.
like that team. I've watched enough Eternal Fire right at the moment that I think this is the best looking roster Eternal Fire have ever had. I think Wakadia, who by the way is an academy graduate from Eternal Fire Academy, is unbelievable. I think basically when you watch an Eternal Fire best of 3, you can expect 2 things, and it's basically Xantara's popping off, and then it will either be one of Woxic and Wakadia on map 2. They'll be the ones that pop off. Xantara's will dip a little bit in form, then it will go third map, and Calix will have a massive moment in like round 26, and they'll win the best of 3. And I guarantee you that happens again at Pro League, and it happens pretty much every single series I watch them play. So I think they're a really good team. Do I think they'll make it out of the group? I mean, maybe. Why not? How many teams make it through the group again? Is it like 4?
So it's 4.
4,
So
yeah.
I'd say that.
Oh yeah,
the
I'd back them. G2,
the likely
VP,
4
Eternal Fire, Cloud9. Yeah, that's fine.
over Liquid. Okay, I like it.
Yeah.
Call
Yes,
mine
over
a hot
Liquid.
take, and then proceed to like predict the entire round 17, and like. Yeah, first Antara is going to be good, then Wikidia, then Calix will win a sick round to win a best of 3. You're like, that's a hot take to me.
Brandon's written the script for this. He is
Fully.
the Eternal Fire script writer. He knows exactly what's going on. But didn't they play?
I've watched enough Eternal Fire. I know.
They
They
played
play that LAN.
it was it Reds, the last Premier qualifier, and I believe Xantaras and Woxic were 3rd and 4th highest rated. I think it was that tournament. I don't
They
know the
actually nearly
entire
beat
name of
Cloud9,
it,
yeah.
but that Reds tournament is the longest name of any tournament. It's so unnecessary.
Yeah. They also
like-
though played this like Dunav party LAN and went out in last place, so they got owned by Deco. So you know,
Oh no.
who
Okay,
knows?
well,
Who knows?
it seems that we have our predictions then, and we'll see how they go. They'll probably end up on as clips on our Twitter, depending on what's right. Especially if Brandon can predict the entire series of an Eternal Fire game, that would be very impressive. So yeah, this has been the Pinnacle Stack. These are our guests. We were going to have a bit of a game, but we might end up looking to try and do that another time towards the end of CSGO, as it features some of that stuff. And we got to get the quizman NaTo back on board after he had reigned supreme over everyone else during last EPL, managed with all the quizzes that we did.
Can't we
Let's
just
see if-
hide from him? I want to actually win.
Yeah, like, it was such a joke. I was watching that video back, and I thought I did well on it. And I'm watching NATO just pull facts from like the back corners of his brain. And I just didn't know half this stuff existed. I'm like, all right, do you know what? Have the video win. Like,
Bro, you guys are too nice. I'm just a Counter-Strike fan. I remember things that I watch and read and do anything related to Counter-Strike all the time. It's so amazing.
It was funny.
But I would love to come. I would love to come back for another game.
Definitely. Yes. No, we'll definitely have to go back on board and try and get this game done, because it would be interesting to see how you guys do, because there's a difficulty system as well. So kind of hyping it up a little bit now, but we'll see. We'll see if we can get that sorted out so we can get you guys competing against each other, because I think it'd be quite funny. But yeah, this has been the Pinnacle Stack. Thank you all for watching. Unless you guys have anything else you want to say, we'll say our goodbyes.
VP win the group, easy.
It's the last minute hot take from Walker.
You just said Cloud9, or
What? No one remembers that. I just clicked the
Oh,
one that's
good.
right.
All right, well that's the one. That's the one. That's the clip that's going out. Okay. All right. Well, thank you for watching, guys, and make sure you check these guys out on their socials, on their streams, everywhere else that you can find them. And yeah, we'll see you in the next one.